On behalf of Ishara, Smitha, we would like to thank Priyanka, our in-house curator, for this fantastic show and our first summer show. This is the first time Ishara is actually doing a summer show. So we hope that you continue the trend and we have many more summer shows as well. A whole team of artists without which this exhibition would not have been possible. So thank you to all of you. Thank you to Reframe, who's actually supported this project as well. And I'm going to open the floor to Priyanka, who's going to have questions for each one of you. Rami got away. But so I'm hoping this dialogue would help us understand the practice, the work, the streets better. So thank you once again for joining us this evening. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for trespassing first and foremost. It's lovely to see such an amazing crowd over here. And before we begin, I do want to thank a couple of people, so you'll just have to bear with me for like maybe 20-25 seconds or so. So I do want to thank Sabi a lot because he's been a huge guide and a mentor to for this whole exhibition, and then of course Sasha, because she's been so encouraging and nurturing and also like helping us all out with this exhibition. I do want to thank my team at Ishara for being such a huge support, Gayatri, Marzia, Bilal, Grace, and Saqib. And we begin with the fun part now. So just to give you a bit of a context about what this exhibition is all about, it reels in the energy of the streets. And streets are so vast and they have so much more to talk about that it's just very difficult to comprehend all of that in one single exhibition. It's also quite unjust to it. So we're bringing in the aesthetics and the energy of the streets. Streets are very unruly, streets are romantic, streets are also chaotic. They're very systemic yet disruptive. So we've tried to kind of own that all in this exhibition. I've also ragged a lot of like my artists over here and their brains through the past couple of months, and Khaled is agreeing to that. Thank you so much. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring together an exhibition which is a bit more unruly in nature, and this is the first time that Ishara is doing something like this. Also thinking about what our relationships of the streets have been like, and how does that respond within a white cube space. So this format is very simple. I'll be asking one single question to all of these artists, and when we think about streets, we're also thinking about surfaces. There are voids, there are textures, there are patterns, and so much more. So my very first question is for Fatspatrol. She's been a huge and an integral part of street art from this region. And we often confuse street art and graffiti as one single format, but there's a world of a difference. So what would you say is the actual difference between street art and graffiti? And also, do you think that it's important that all the street artists have a pseudonym?
Hello. First of all, I want to say that I'm not any sort of authority on speaking on graffiti. I did start out using spray cans with graffiti writers, and that's sort of the extent of my experience with graffiti. But it's also important to know that there's a really big difference in where graffiti started in the late 60s and 70s in New York, and where it started simply as this like act of deviance and tagging. It was a way of claiming space and making statements, and it was very sort of socially driven. There was a lot of crime, a lot of gang-related issues at the time. And I think it's funny because I was thinking about this at 3 o'clock this morning when I couldn't sleep, because I had a dream about a lionfish. But I was also thinking, I was like, oh, well, maybe the difference is obvious. Street art is sanctioned and has permission. Graffiti doesn't, but that's actually not true, because when I was living in East London in 2005, and Banksy and Roa and Sweet Tooth and Stick and all these artists were coming up, there was no permission, there was no sanction. There's a lot of street art that came up in this part of the world as well that did not have permission attached to it, like Arcadia Blank. So I think it comes down to intention. I think it comes down to what you're trying to say. I think a lot of street artists are artists. Graffiti writers were always writers until at some point they started calling themselves artists and caring about the craft and the aesthetic and everything else.
Do you think a pseudonym is important for street artists?
I think the anonymity was important in the beginning because it was so illegal and it was so deviant and it was so unsanctioned. But I feel like, I don't know, as someone who paints with a pseudonym, it gives me the freedom to not be tied to the socially prescribed categories that come with my given name. Obviously my real name is Fatima, which is Muslim and a woman and everything else, and I think you get a lot of freedom in a pseudonym. I get messages on Instagram sometimes where people are like, oh, dude, you're a chick. And, I like that. So it's not necessary. It's fun.
And so then where do you think Fatspatrol came from?
Oh, jeez. So when I moved to Canada, people had trouble saying my name properly. They always said Fatima, and they still do. It's really annoying. So I was like, hey, why don't we just say Fats? And then I was setting up my Instagram account, and there were too many Fatses. So I was driving my Nissan Patrol. It's really not deep. But it's kind of become a fun way to tell people about the part of the world that I grew up in. Like when I travel and people are like, oh, what's patrol? I'm like, oh, how do you not know a Nissan Patrol? Because this is a thing that we do in the Middle East. We drive in the desert and we camp. We don't all go to brunch and party on yachts. So it's become a nice way to tell people about where I grew up.
Well, see, you're good at it. You were nervous all this while. Talking about street art, we also have a wonderful street artist who's not present here, but his artwork is, which is H11235. Don't ask me about his name. I think you should all spam him over Instagram and just ask him about where this H11235 comes from. But it's interesting to note in this exhibition about this particular artwork because he had a totally different idea of what he will be bringing in this exhibition, which is right there. It's a small piece of work, and it's very intricate, and he works around surroundings, and also a lot of photorealism in his artwork, and he paints it all on like these massive scale and murals, right? But unfortunately, he did not attain his visa, so we had to quickly shift our gears and move on to a plan B. And with this plan B, he basically took out everything intricate and made it more abstract, and which is what you see here because we executed it right here along with my wonderful team at Ishara, right? And it also kind of brings us towards this notion of that you're not only navigating through uncertainties when it comes to site-specific works, but also the fact that borders, they dictate so much when it comes to even artworks. And this is quite relative to our exhibition that we had previously, which was Shilpa Gupta talking all about borders. So we're not going to be getting into that, but I think my next question is probably for Salma, because we have a wonderful space inside that you must have seen, and it's massively layered. She's probably the only artist at Ishara for this exhibition who worked for 21 days, 3 weeks, guys, 3 weeks. And so there was layers after layers, and there was like this whole different process of it, which included spray paints, posters, and joint compound. So would you want to talk about your process, about like how does it all evolve, first of all, and most of all, when do you feel the need to stop?
I don't know if I know the answer to that. Yeah, sure. My process is a lot about what what I see on walls and what I think the walls essentially are there for. I start by writing things I collect as part of my research on what people choose to write on walls. So if no one can see you, especially with what Fats was saying about being anonymous, no one can see you, what would you paint, what would you write? And then that changed into being which part of the world. I was in Chicago and I started this research, but I'm also Palestinian, so that also affects a lot on what people choose to write on walls and how that differs, and of course the situation of when people are writing. So that's when I started writing on these walls, and then I thought by covering it, because a lot of graffiti or like the things written on streets are viewed as vandalism, and that things that need to be covered. And sometimes you'll see walls that are like this thick from just bad paint jobs. So it's also that, and if you were to take all these layers off, how many traces would you find of people? How many people wrote on these walls? What people choose to write on these walls? So then I start layering, and it's part of this like removing my own trace, because it's usually other people removing traces, but for me the process was me writing something. So a lot of it is that the material I use, I want it from whenever I started this series, I wanted to start with building materials. I didn't want to take art supplies and do these paintings. I usually work on paintings, do these paintings that look like walls. So I didn't making them the way walls are made. So it's a lot of cement, wood, joint compound, to have that authenticity to it, I guess. So it's that, and then the walls you see inside have a lot of posters on them. These posters are real archival posters from Palestine, some dating back to 1948. And I scratch a lot at them, I take a lot at them, but when they're laid out, you can see how transitional it has become on those posters. Again, some for like, vote for this person, vote for that person, and the others are like, we have 2 couches for sale at a discounted price. So it really it's just what people choose to communicate on these walls.
Thank you. I like the fact that you've mentioned traces and authenticity, which kind of brings me to Khaled's piece, which is also in the same room, and that's the only work I would say that allows the public to destroy as they walk, and then you start revealing the words. So my question to you is pretty basic. The question is that given the interactivity of your work, what do you think you want the viewers or the audience to take away from it?
I think a good way to answer that is to talk about the inspiration behind the work. So it's an extension of themes that I've been working on urban redevelopment, specifically in Abu Dhabi, the city where I was born and raised in, and came in particular from one night when I was walking home from my studio, and then I noticed these ads for a new place that was being developed, and then I started seeing these words like authentic, heritage, legacy. And I thought, it was kind of funny. And then I just kept on walking, and then I found more and more of those words, and then I started getting closer to them. And I started seeing all these markings that were on them at the same time. So things from like either construction materials being thrown off or people writing graffiti on these, like canvas hoardings. And I was working with text a lot at that time, which was a huge shift in my practice. So this one really in particular was interrogating the vocabulary being used to justify these new developments. Because for me, when I encountered these words, it was like, okay, how do you construct authenticity? How do you construct heritage or legacy or any of these things? But also more than that, what do we as, people who live and work in the city, what part do we play in this? Which brings me to the process of leading to it, which, we did share a couple of ideas at first, and it wasn't initially this, but as we were developing this piece and trying to decide like, what space should this go to, how big was this supposed to be, and then eventually, we went from a 2 by 3 meter space to the entire room, which is 10.5 by 12 meters. This is the largest scale work I've ever done, and it was the most physically challenging as well. But I think seeing it now in the space made me reflect a lot, because when we were going over initial designs, it was like, oh, this is too controlled. No, this is too designy. Change it. Do something else. It needs to reflect the unruliness and the chaos and the disorder that you're trying to resist this very rigid, constructed, designed, manufactured change from. So it was only until like multiple iterations of deciding what we wanted to do until we landed on one particular set, which is the design that you see right now, where it's super intense as soon as you walk into the room, and then you're confronted with the fact that you have to step on this work if you want to see the rest of the exhibition. You have to engage with it. And it made me think about how we, as people in the city, what part do we play when we're engaging with this? I often think like, okay, when I go to these spaces, right, I don't know if complacent or complicit is the right word, because ultimately these spaces are designed for us. They are marketed for people like us. It isn't necessarily for the people who were originally in those areas. So it made me really want people to think that by stepping on this, what part do you play? Whether or not, regardless of whatever your feelings might be, what part do you have in all of this, like in this giant system that, you know, maybe us as individuals have no control or power over? But it was a way for me to essentially exercise that thought of asking that question rather than trying to pose an answer to it. So,
yeah, there was also a point wherein we were questioning if we should have shoe covers.
Yeah. I was like, I see a lot of expensive shoes today, and I was like, yeah, I don't want anyone coming to me and saying, oh, your work stained my shoes. But then we're like, if we literally just walk outside right now, I mean, it's the street. You could be stepping on God knows what. So, welcome to the streets, I guess. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And talking about walking, we have Sara over here, who's also an educator and uses walking as her methodology. The first time that I came across her work was over a usual Google search, and I was fascinated by her usage of lighting. And it kind of also took me back to this particular area in New Delhi called Paharganj, which is lit up. And for some, it's also quite resonating to these structures in Hong Kong, which made me kind of quite intrigued. And then we had a studio visit and made me realize more about her practice. So I wanted to check with you, like your work in this exhibition and your practice in general is so much more related to lights. So what draws you to this element?
I was reflecting a lot on this question that you asked me earlier. We were talking. I think this idea of light or reflection has always been in my practice. I did a lot of work with, pinhole cameras where we use light as a source to capture a scene. And then I did a lot of photography and a lot of mirror work and light boxes, and then slowly it kind of evolved into using LED lights. For my MFA thesis, which I did in 2024, I did a lot of walking in downtown Abu Dhabi, and for me as an Emirati, downtown Abu Dhabi was more of a car culture. We would visit, the tailor shop or restaurants and just go in our cars. I mean, just more and more climate plays a big role in this, but it's just, I've never been consciously or actively aware of like, just go and walk. And so I wanted to do that as a method to see how my art practice can intuitively grow through walking. And I found that walking was a major contributor to a lot of things that I did after my thesis. I encountered intimate stories, encountered beautiful compositions in urban spaces, but also challenged myself a lot with like being a female, but also an Emirati walking in spaces that is not particularly like that I'm used to. It's probably like an unfamiliar landscape for me, but there was a sense of curiosity in me that really wanted to penetrate and integrate into communities. And so I would go in and have dinner at a Nepalese restaurant, or, an Indian restaurant, and they would see me, and it's just these moments really kind of informed my practice as well, informed me a lot about the, let's say, curated structures and boundaries in urban architecture. But I really wanted to kind of express that in my artwork through systems, through using forms that is light, concrete, but also my intimate form of art making, which is the layers of maps that are imprinted onto these concrete blocks. It's quite difficult to include 3 very strong art forms and kind of bring them together. But this is the whole idea of me exploring or investigating urban architecture. It talks about disturbing, let's say, art forms coming together and how you can bring them together. Yeah, so I think light really conceptually to me is about invisibility and visibility. Systems or structures in the form that I created in the art space is more about accessibility and inaccessibility. And I really leave the space for people to observe, for people to have a conversation. It's not really for me to answer or give research-based evaluations, but it's more of me intimately investigating spaces that are going to be, you know, some buildings are going to be demolished and new ones will be built. And what does that mean for the shops that are within these buildings or the people who have been living in these buildings? So it's me kind of in between the private and the public space, and how with time and with more time and walking can really bring about more investigations and explorations.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. It's also about like how we experience streets, and each one of us has like different experience and an understanding of the streets, which is cultivated perhaps from where we are at, and yeah, like what follows in terms of our eyes and also what registers in our minds. And Rami's not here with us, but we have a concept, which is also talking about the inside and outside dichotomy, because that's also what we've reeled in within this exhibition. We've touched upon traces, we have touched upon layers, we've touched upon lights, and so much more. But disruption and unruliness is also a very, very integral aesthetic of a street. I think from my end, my only last question for all of you is that even for Ishara, this exhibition in general has been a very out of comfort zone exhibition, and it's also something new that we've reeled in. So what were your out of comfort zone moments?
So this is quite, I mean, I think I was quite emotionally charged during this process, because I've spent a good part of my career working outside on the street in really interesting parts of the world and really rejecting the gallery, even though I worked in galleries when I was really young. You know, by the time I was 27, I was like, this is too like hoity-toity for me. That's not to say that I don't appreciate this opportunity, and it's been a really interesting learning curve, and I've become really aware of some of my complacency in my practice as well. But it was little, you know, apart from the really obvious, like, logistical stuff, you know, I said to Priyanka, I'm used to crossing the street to see my mural, and literally I'm like trying to get to the other side of this room, and suddenly everything looks so small. So more than the sort of logistical stuff in terms of like lighting and scale and materials, and you know, usually when you work on the street, you're not used to these beautiful, creamy, soft surfaces. The question that really bothered me at 4 o'clock this morning was, when I've worked on the street, there's always this kind of heroicism of what you're doing. Even if people don't like what you're painting, they're still going to give you a high five and be like, oh, good for you. Check out that little human up on that boom lift up the side of that building. Like, there's still this applause for the active, creative process. And when you come into the gallery, and this is a really harsh word, and I'm going to use it because it's one of my favorite words, but it's a bit harsh, but suddenly when we come into the gallery, we have the audacity to decide the worth, the relevance, the value, the impact of someone's piece of art. And you, as an artist, you become so separated from the thing that you've made. You know, and I did an interview like a month ago where I was like, oh, when I paint murals, I feel like a superhero. I did not feel like a superhero here. I felt incredibly emotionally vulnerable and open to critique. And yeah, really just sort of, and it kind of got me asking about myself about in these sort of institutions for art, when there's so much value and precedence given to the curators and the funders and the, you know, all the institutional stuff, the collectors and the critique, the critics and everything else, like when did the artist stop being the hero? Just for being out there, just for being vulnerable, just for, you know, reaching inside yourself and pulling something out, whether anybody likes it or not. And yeah. I think that's my big sort of like takeaway.
Some parts of it is what Basquiat mentioned also.
Oh, really? Well, there you go.
Okay. For me, I think the most uncomfortable part, or there were a couple, but the one that, in fact, everyone that comes inside mentions it to me, that now it's been like more embedded, the size of the place. And I've seen it before when it was dark, when we were still curating. And I came one day and there was light, and I was like, Priyanka, I cannot do this in 3 weeks. Like, there's absolutely no way. And we decided we're just gonna cover a few of the walls. We're just gonna cover 1 or 2 of the walls, and then we're gonna do something else with the rest. So that was mostly it. It was very different. And then yesterday, Priyanka asked me to make a small piece. It's the one at the door. It's 12 by 6 inches, and that happens to be the smallest piece I've ever done as well. So I've moved from usually doing like 2.5 meter paintings that people were like, oh my God, that's huge, to this room, and then the same day I finished to going to my studio to do a piece that's literally this small. So that moving between scale and trying to see how much detail is too much detail, because I go super in detail, but also time was a constraint. So it was that, and I also really agree with the critique part. I'm used to working in my studio. No one usually comes to my studio except a few people. They usually know my work, they know what I do, and my studio mates. But I was here on the scaffold for 3 weeks, and people were coming in. People from the team were coming in, people from Circle were coming in, and I was constantly having to think about what did I write on the walls, because all of the things I layer for a reason, and they don't show now for a reason. So I'm always like, oh, like what if someone walks in and I'm writing this thing on the wall, or these posters are still very on view. So I was constantly thinking of the point where I leave the work, because then I'm not going to be there. I'm not going to be in control of people, like me being there explaining that, oh, this is going to be covered. It's not going to look like this. So there was that as well, be the exposure to so many people. And yeah, I think that should be it.
I think there were 2 challenging things for me. To work a site-specific work within a white cube space was a bit challenging for me, because I'm in conversation with the space before the corridor and then the space leading into Khaled's work. I really wanted to be in conversation with the artists or the experience. And so the work was changing all the time. For me as an artist, if I have something set, like my vision is so like invested in it, and then it keeps changing, that can be sometimes puts you in a very vulnerable space as an artist, because you don't know the end result of the artwork. But that really pushed me in a way that to kind of lean into change, lean into mistakes. The other part of it was more, I think, about the art piece itself, is that there were a lot of colors involved. It was hard for me in the beginning to kind of tone it down to make it really express what I'm trying to say without using too much color or too much like of pop. I wanted to show my research through these different art forms. And then towards the end, like literally a few days ago, when Priyanka and I were in the space together, even with Bilal, I have to give a shout out to Bilal. Thank you so much. He also helped me kind of curate these stacks of blocks, and just having conversations with Khaled and Salma, it really did help me kind of hone in and understand where does the LED light end? How can I make it so that it's a tension between can you go into the space or not? And then when you enter Khaled's space, you have no choice but to walk on the artwork. So kind of what was challenging for me was leaning into the change, leaning into the site specificity within a white cube. But that really kind of made me stronger as an artist, I believe. And yeah.
Oh man, where do I begin? So I've said that this was the largest scale I've ever worked with. And something I want to emphasize is that this was not by any means Khaled Esguerra work. There were at least like 30 or 40 other names that were brought into this. It's 800 sheets of copier paper glued to carbon paper individually that were then installed individually on the floor across the, I didn't even count how many days I was in here, but it felt like a lot. There were so many hands involved in this process, and I would go on forever if I were to name, all of them. But this was the one work where I think I realized I cannot do everything by myself. I usually am very, very pedantic about my hands being involved in every single step of the process from start to finish. Even in other exhibitions that I do, I insist that I am the one who's going to install the work. Like, no, I can hang this on a wall, or I can do this, I can do that. But I think especially when the work was transforming, we went from where Sara's work was actually supposed to be to just that strip in between the corner of the wall and then the other column all the way to the entire space. So I kind of had a similar reaction as Salma did when I was like, oh my God, I have to do the entire floor now. But no, I mean, it was physically challenging, yes, but also, I mean, conceptually working in a scale like this really kind of made me, at least for the 2 minutes when I was in that space now, seeing it with the lighting and everything, made me realize things that I'm still not gonna lie, processing and reflecting on, because my work is very much related to the streets. It's very much related to the urban, which is already in itself massive in scale. But I've never done anything beyond an 80 by 60 photograph, for example. So that was, I think, in a similar sense to what Sara just said, it's starting to make me think about how I could push this further with other things. Then there's also the conceptual challenge as well. There are challenges over, where you can showcase what, and how can you talk about what, in a similar sense of how Salma says, oh, what if someone walks in when I'm spray painting this word? What if I'm doing this? What if I'm doing that? What does it mean if someone is stepping on, a piece of paper that said authentic or heritage? We had conversations about what languages we wanted to do it in. Then I was like, no, absolutely not. We're not making people step the word culture in Arabic with their footprints. There's no way we're doing that. But there was that challenge as well of how do I present something from my home outside of my home? And will this ever get a chance to live on, back to the place where it originally began? So it was all about trying to translate something like this that, yes, started in one particular spot or particular area, but is nonetheless applicable to many, many other neighborhoods and areas, not just in this country, but even the entire region and so many other parts around the world. So physically, conceptually, I don't know how any other time I think I've pushed myself more than this, but again, so many hands were involved in this. I couldn't have done it throughout the very beginning. It all started from a workshop just next door with my dear friend Mehra for her Circal research grant. That was when the carbon paper was introduced. Then it transitioned into the Jamil piece when I was part of the takeover this year into 90 by 60 wooden panels. And then we have this. So one thing I can definitely agree on, and I know I'll stop right here, but after this, no more carbon paper, ever.
Well, I think it's a good time to open the floor for the public if you have any questions for our wonderful artists over here.
Honestly, I would like to say a round of applause for every single artist here. You guys have done an amazing work. But I have a question for every single one of you. How do you guys deal with different levels of criticism and like critique? I think every one of us here thinks differently of your work. So if someone walks up to you and be like, I don't really get what kind of story this portrays, or I don't get why you use this kind of material, or what's the reflection behind it? How do you process this and this, like the idea behind it? And does it help you grow? Does it pull you back? What's the impact of this on you?
Okay, I'll start. I went to a design school. If there's anything I've learned about design and architecture schools, is that they really pummel you to the ground. We had this thing called like reviews, which are basically like crits, where you could have like 8 to 10 people who have never seen your work before comment and critique and say, oh, do this, do this, do that, and all that. But I think over the years, because I've been practicing both design as a profession and art as a practice for the past 4 or 5 years, the one thing I've learned is just take what is applicable to you, what you think is necessary, and not just, like validating, but necessary. I feel there's a huge distinction between both. And then it's just a matter of like what you decide you want to do. So for me, it's also a struggle for me to distinguish between my design practice and my art practice, because with design is so intentional, and every decision is justified and ultimately made to be viewed for somebody else's own consumption or viewing. Whereas in art, I often use it as an outlet to break free from that responsibility, whether it's selfish or not. But for me, I think that because of that, I am willing to accept more and more of that criticism, because not just because I've been able to do it before, but just to apply it to my arts practice in specific, and then deciding what could I use to push what I'm doing further. So like with what Priyanka said, right, about one of the earlier designs we had was a very much inspired by the sidewalk patterns in Alahbabi. But then she was like, oh, that's too controlled. We're not talking about control here. We're talking about disorder. We're talking about unruliness. We're talking about this, and that. Then, so it had to go through multiple rounds before we could reach something. And, I could have just said, no, I want this, and then, just go with it. But I knew she had a point. So, and I wanted to, reach that point so that the work can communicate itself in the best way that it could. So,
I think for me personally, my research is very much about integrating and wanting to kind of investigate spaces that are more private, let's say. So I think criticism is very key to my research, especially if it's going to inform my research further. Like Khaled said, take in what is applicable to our art making, but at the same time, I think for me personally, I need criticism to inform my research even better.
For me, I think I used to be very defensive about criticism, but I also went to a super, let's say, harsh art school. So my first few crits, I was always like, it's my work. But then that slowly changed, especially with the nature of the work. It became less personal and became more about what people are writing on the streets. And that's not up to me. I'm making what people are writing on the streets. And like Sara said, criticism is very necessary, because the work I make is a reflection of the people outside and also of the audience that come to look at it. So it's this conversation that happens with what people previously have written and done so many times, and what people now choose to think of this or how to look at it. So I think it's very important now, but I do still have that hint of, smile.
Yeah, I think if you've been an art student, you're already used to the process of going through critiques. But I think for me as well, because I've spent so much time painting on the street, you will have all kinds of things shouted at you, like we're not allowed to swear. You know, it's be here a while. But I think at the end of the day, for me, because my work is so personally connected to who I am, how I process the world, how I make sense of things, how I self-therapeutize, you know, it's, you're not going to please everybody, but at least make sure that you're satisfying something in yourself, because then you've always won.
Any further questions?
Hi. Firstly, thank you for a wonderful panel discussion. My question is for you, Priyanka. I mean, knowing that you have like an immense amount of background in public art, and then bringing in those synergies within a white cube space, and bringing in a mix of artists who work with public realm and also working in the format of artworks or contemporary works, what were the difficulties you faced? You know, because graffiti art or working particularly on a site has a very different approach as opposed to what you've gotten here at Ishara.
Well, it's a nice question with a very complicated response. I think I'll start off by saying that when you're working in a white cube space, there's more control, so there's method to madness, whereas when you're working outside in public realm, there's madness becomes the method. So I think for me, first and foremost, the challenge was the trust thing, because the institute itself gave me that trust along with my artists over here, because you've had, like, an institute in general works along with already pre-existing works. You have SketchUp files, you know what kind of design that you're working with, you have like a whole exhibition design, you know which work goes where, and the chances are that the changes are only about, let's say, 20% when you work in an exhibition space, as opposed to over here where nothing was really decided. Like H11, we came up with this design literally 3 weeks before because of this whole visa issue, right? And then even with Fats, she had a trip back in India right before her commencement of the work inside, and she got inspired by brooms. And it's the first time that she's worked with brooms. And while she was in India, she just texted me that, hey, listen, can I use brooms? And I'm like, yeah, go loco. Like, I trust you, I know your practice. And similarly with like all of my other artists over here also. So the trust becomes a huge factor. And then working with the controlled space becomes a lot difficult. I'm not saying that either or is more challenging. Both come up with their own challenges. But it's just about how you navigate through them. Have I answered that? Okay, cool.
Hi, I just had a very simple question around how you go about doing your thing in the city, which is like on a very real world practical level, like what does it really mean to trespass when you step out into the world? Because we are also, I don't know, is there a set of do's and don'ts? Is there a way of exchanging those? Is there a modus operandi that you share within yourselves but don't really reveal to the world outside? Yeah, just curious to hear more on that. Also, since you all grew up or operated in or crossed this city or Abu Dhabi, you spoke widely about working in the UAE, but also in the region specifically. So it'd be nice to know like how you went about doing your thing in different cities that you participated in. Yeah.
Is it open for all or directed to?
No, open to all, yeah. Okay.
I don't know which two words to use here, so, and they have different connotations, but it's either confidence or delusion, I feel. Like when I walk into spaces and document, like, let's say, abandoned buildings or buildings that are about to be demolished or other places like that, I think there's just no other way to do it except just do it, I feel. Okay, maybe if I want to walk around in a construction area, like I'll bring a vest and a helmet, you know what I mean? Or if I'm gonna go into this abandoned warehouse, I'll just pry the doors open and just pray no one sees me. But it's kind of the mentality of, you know, like when people drive like terribly, and then in Arabic we say like Shara Abuk, like it's your father's street. Like, hey, Shara Abuy, it's my street, it's my place, it's my space. I'm gonna walk in, I'm gonna decide what I'm gonna do. So there's a bit of, you know, obviously there's risk to it, absolutely. Even just walking around with a camera in public is risky. Photographing certain places is risky. Sometimes there are protected areas that are controlled by who knows, the private landlord, the government, etc. I've had instances where I was stopped by police asking like, oh, what are you doing? What is this for? What company do you work for? Sometimes the artist card works, sometimes the student card works. It just depends on their mood. But there are a lot of rules and restrictions around the public, and for me it's just finding ways to get around that, to claim it as mine. What is mine? That's the question I'm trying to ask with my work, but that's how I attempt it, at least.
For me, I'm going to talk about my mentor, may he rest in peace, Tariq Al-Hussein. Amazing mentor and advisor when I was an undergrad at NYU. I took a photography class with him, and then that's when I decided I really wanted to pursue visual arts. He used to always say, ask for forgiveness, not permission. So I tried to go by that rule, but as a woman integrating into public urban architecture spaces, it's a bit difficult. I really think men have an easier way of navigating those private spaces than women, but my kind of way was going at night, which is so, you know, juxtaposed to many cities. I felt safer at night, felt less exposed with my abaya and camera. And that's when I was fascinated by the LED lights, and that's how they came about in my work. So I try to go by the ask for forgiveness, not permission, but I'm such a rule follower, it's a bit difficult. But yeah, so going at night made me feel like I could trespass through certain areas, take, you know, photos, but I always also tried to be quite ethical about it. Subjects were not in my documentations unless I've had a full conversation with them and they understood that I'm an artist. I was stopped a lot, not by police, but I was stopped a lot by the people in the community thinking I was from the municipality, like documenting stuff that is, you know, not supposed to be there or whatever. But I told them, no, you know, I'm an artist, come look at my camera. And so it's just interesting seeing how I was kind of interacted with the individuals and how you were. But I hope that answers your question.
I find the most challenging part in looking for things to actually document, because I'm specifically looking at what people write on walls and things that shouldn't be written on walls, and that here is quite difficult to find. You need to really look for things that will probably not be there tomorrow. So sometimes they're very temporary. I'm like, oh, I'm pretty sure I drove past something written here. And then the next day there's nothing written there. So the challenging part is finding things to document, actually, of what people want to write. And sometimes I take pictures of very worn out walls. And like you were saying, like people look at you so confused, like why did you just leave your car here to take a picture of this like really torn up wall?
Sorry, I've got like 3 answers swirling at the same time.
Go for one.
I was just going to say like compassion and kindness, to be honest. You know, as someone who's super third culture, I don't really belong anywhere. Anytime I literally set foot outside of my body, if that makes sense, I feel like I'm trespassing and having to find ways to navigate the world. And I've worked on so many sites, you know, I've painted murals across from like addiction, rehabilitation facilities. I've picked up needles off sites where I've been painting murals. I've had people with addiction problems trying to steal my paint while I'm working. But I'll go over to them and be like, hey, that's my paint, but do you want to see what I'm doing? Can I tell you a story? Can I hear your story? I've just, not to sound super hippy-dippy love to wrap this up, but that has been the way to navigate at the end of the day, is through compassion and kindness. Yeah.
Beginning, I need to thank Ishara that they're giving this opportunity to young artists, because this is really, in this time, it's very rare to find the people that believe in young people, because they are. Me, as an old man, in the last few years, I recognize that you need to learn from young people, because nothing to learn from old anymore, because it's a new life. We living in different life, they living in different, and it is time to learn from them. By the way, I am father of Salma. She's my professor. She's my. I learn from her every day new things, and I ask you to give us small thoughts or your messages to us. Everyone, what 1, 2, 3 words, because we need to learn from you. You are amazing, all of you.
Well, as the oldest person on this bench, hopefully there's something I can share too. I really don't know what to say though. I don't know, just, move with authenticity and curiosity. And there's this thing I said to a bunch of kids at a high school I spoke at last year, which the teachers weren't very happy about. But I said to them, if you're going to be a beep beep to your parents, make sure it's worth it. Have purpose. Channel that fire into something that really matters to you.
First of all, that's my amazing father. I think we already know that by now, but biggest shout out to him. He's my main support and my backbone. If I were to say something, I would say that this year I learned the most to make the opportunity, not to look for it. And I think there's always something, and there's always someone looking. Priyanka found me through a studio visit that wasn't for me. She was just checking the studio spaces, and she messaged me. So really, there's always more opportunity for you to find, not to wait for. And if it's not there, then you're more than capable of making it.
If you're an artist, I encourage you, if you're thinking about it, to resign your corporate job and pursue art making. I also wanted to address your father. You have a wonderful daughter. You raised her very well. I love her so much. Mabruk to everyone here. Ishara mabruk. And also want to thank the entire team. Go ahead.
I wish I had anything more eloquent to say, but I just have one word: walk. I know Dubai is not as easy compared to Abu Dhabi, but please, just, even if it's in your neighborhood, just walk. Walk the same route for a week or two. I promise you're gonna notice something different, at least halfway. And then you're gonna start noticing even more, and then you're gonna start wanting to walk more, and then you're gonna start walking everywhere else. And that is the only way to know what this city means to you, and whatever, not just Dubai, but whatever city you identify with. It's the only way. It's the only way. And for me, it's been my way of recognizing what Abu Dhabi is to me, because you can't define. I'm not the authority on Abu Dhabi. I usually joke and tell people like, oh yeah, I am Abu Dhabi, but la, yani, there's no single definition. Same way with Dubai, same way with Sharjah. It's what you make out of it, because to say what it is under one blank slate is just diminishing or minimizing so much more complexity that millions and millions of other people bring. So, just walk, write your own definition of the city.
And with that, we wrap it up. For all of those who have more questions, the artists are still here. In continuation of which, I would just say that let's shake things up. This summer has been super duper exciting with some wonderful shows and very exciting ones. We have Richie Bhatia's solo at Gallery Isabel. Osis curated an amazing show at FE. There's Muhammad Al-Farad's show, solo at Jameel. So I would just say that think about it in a way that you have a playlist of Fleetwood Mac, you hear a song one after the other, and then suddenly you hear Taylor Swift. So shake it off. Thank you.